Hi, I'm Karen with My Kids Gay, and I'm okay. So today's guest of mine is Dennis Bunton, and he is joining me from Owensboro, Kentucky. Dennis, welcome. And why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself?
Hi, Karen. Thank you for having me on. I guess I'm a 49-year-old trans man. I'm a therapist and I work primarily with the LGBT community. I transitioned myself when I was 19, medically transitioned at 19. I socially transitioned when I was 14 years old. I have worked as a professor and I have worked as a therapist. I've done research and developing curriculum to train counselors to work with transgender people and to help counselors supervisors or supervisors and counselors to work with transgender people. I have 4 children. I guess that's kind of
That's a lot. So you said that you, like at 14, started living. Did you at that point in time start living as a male?
I started part-time living as male, so not at school, but with my family and friends, I was out and socially transitioned. So pretty much just except for whenever I was at school, I was living for the most part as a male. That was back in the early 1990s, and there was really nothing being said about trans people at that time. In fact, I didn't know what a trans person was. I just knew how I felt. I didn't have the language at that time to even know what I was. Not having the internet or anything at that time, it was a very confusing time. That I just knew how I felt, and that I did know that were procedures to help change gender. That I didn't know what the people were called that did that.
Gotcha. And then, like, at at what age were you aware, like, you identified more as male? Is that something like just early in your childhood or at 14 it happened?
I do not ever remember a time that I did not know that I was this way. The first recollection that I can actually remember pinpointing that I had a conscious thought that something was different about me, I was about probably 4 years old. And I can remember I was sitting in the bathtub and I had gotten in the bathtub with my shorts on because I didn't feel like things were right. And I have a very vivid memory of that. And I was about around the age of
Okay, good. And then at 19, when you started that process, what did that entail?
so back then the process of transitioning was much more strictly governed. It was under standards care four. And so I lived in a small town in Southern Illinois, and the closest place I could find to go to a therapist was in St. Louis, Missouri. So I had to travel an hour and a half once a week and pay a therapist, a clinical psychologist. It wasn't even just a counselor because it had to be a clinical psychologist in cash because insurance would not cover anything at that time for over a year just to start hormones at that time. And then it took another year to get approved for surgery. And I also had to have a second evaluation done just for top surgery at that time. It was a much more strict process. I had to be out to everyone. I had to have lived in that role for an entire year, which they called the real life test. It was much more strict, and there was a lot more requirements that people had to go through. And now the standards that we operate under is in the version of eight, so it's been tested and gone through much more and revised and revised and revised. It's a much more easy process.
It's an easy process, but it's not like, you just say, "Hey, this is what I'm gonna do," and then within a week, you start it and you're done. It's still a process, and I want people to understand that.
It's a much more easy process. It's not an easy process. It's just a much more easy process compared to what we used to have to go through. It's still a very difficult process. It's not something that's simple or taken lightly by any stretch of the word.
Yeah, because there's so much you've seen the post, I've seen the post, "Hey, this little girl went to school and she came home a boy and the parents didn't know what was going on." And that's not the case, and that's the whole reason why we're having this discussion today among many other discussions, is that it's just not a process that is a one and done. It's ongoing. There are things in place, and like you said, it's been proven.
Correct. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's still very difficult. You still have to have letters of approval. You still have to go through a process where you're evaluated, and if you have any kind of mental health condition that has to be stable, you have to get a letter from a licensed professional. There's still a lot of hoops that have to be gone through. This is not something that you can go to school one day and come back and your gender's changed, or that you can just go to any doctor and get a note from and just walk into a surgeon's office. It's any surgeon's office, and they're going to do it. It's still a very specialized type of a field. Not even you can't even go into any doctor's office and get hormones. It's very specific doctors who work with this, and it's not a lot of doctors.
Okay. That's good. Thanks for the clarification on that. So you were in a small town. How did that how did that I mean, I'm in a small town and I know some of the kids just end up moving away. And so for you, what was your experience with your small town?
So when I transitioned, I started the process of transitioning the day after I graduated from high school. And one of the, like I said, one of the things that you had to do was you had to live full time in the role. This real life test. You had to have your name changed. At that time, to have your name changed, at least where I was from, you had to publish that in the newspaper. My county had one newspaper. And so when that was published, the editor of my hometown newspaper, who was a little bit below a paparazzi rag band, when that was published, he took it upon himself to start digging around, and he decided to write an article for the front page of my hometown newspaper without my knowledge or permission, with the headline, Woman Comes to Grips with Too Many Male Hormones, which is false. That has nothing to do with being transgender. And pretty much everything in that article was false except for my age. So, needless to say, I got to come out to everybody in my county all at once. And this was in 1995. And still very few people understood what it meant to be transgender even at that time. It still was not something that a lot of people were familiar with. Thankfully, I had already came out to my family, so that wasn't a way that they had to find out. And I have an extremely large family, but the town that I'm from, surprisingly, really they didn't have a negative response to that. They seemed more upset that my privacy was violated. And so I actually got a lot of support from the members, the citizens in the town. Now I'm sure there were some people that probably didn't like it, but they were respectful and they didn't do any harm to me. I continued to attend my church. My name was changed on the rolls of my church, and I was treated like any other man in my church. I just lived my life, and I continued to live there the whole time I was attending college. Whenever I met my partner, and she had 3 children, we lived in my town, and my children went to school there. They did not receive any harassment or any kind of backlash because of me. I was very fortunate that most of the people in my town were pretty respectful. I think a lot of it probably had to do with the fact that I was never a quote unquote feminine person. You can look back at pictures of me and I look pretty much like I do now without a beard. So I don't think it was a big shock to anybody that I transitioned. Like I said, the bigger shock was probably just what that type of person was called, and to be educated about, well, this is something that exists. I was fortunate enough growing up that I had some really close friends who were males, and they fully accepted me. I was able to do a lot of things that mostly only males are able to do growing up. So I didn't miss out on a lot of the things that a lot of trans guys do miss out on because they're brought up as girls. The majority of my cousins are males, so I was really included in a lot of things with them. But I feel like I was extremely fortunate to have gotten the response I did because this guy treated me like he did on the front page of the paper. And the town responded in a positive way to that versus a negative way. So ultimately, I think it did kind of help me rather than hurt me. And I guess overall, I didn't have to tell people to come out. It all kind of happened at one time. And I,
Yeah, it was but it could have gone a vastly different way, and you were very what a wonderful gift that town gave you, and your family gave you as well.
yes, in all honesty, I can count on one hand how many people have reacted negatively to me in 31 years.
That's fantastic. That really is. That gives me a lot of hope especially when you're from a small town. Yeah, so that is great. So you've got 3 kids, everybody's thriving, and
Actually, I have 4 now.
oh,
I'm
congratulations.
remarried with my partner, and we have a 10-year-old daughter too.
Congratulations. So you got a full house.
Yes.
You got enough for a basketball team and a little extra there? You got 6 people?
Right. Yeah.
That's good, that's good. So what are you do you said you're a therapist now and you work within the LGBTQ plus community. So what does a typical day look like for you as a therapist?
Well, as of 2023, 2024, a lot of my day consists of working with the trans community and dealing with the uncertainty of our place in society right now,
Mm,
and how to cope with what may or may not come. Coping with not having a voice or having very little voice. It's very difficult for trans people right now in that there is so much being put out that is misinformation about us that people are very willing to believe. It's much easier to believe things you see than to go out and actually talk to a trans person or to even research it. And that is very unfortunate because most trans people are very easy to talk to and they're very willing to be open because we've learned we have to if things are going to change.
yeah, absolutely. Well, and I tell you what, I was talking to some friends and I was not, I remember like 3 years ago, I met my first trans person. But over the last 3 years, I have realized I've met them all along the way.
Yeah.
It was just the person who said, I'm a trans. And then I was like, oh, okay. And I thanked them for sharing because you're taking the risk of negative backlash or worse. But it's made me realize that I've been meeting them all along the way. I just didn't know it. Yeah. So
I've probably had at least 50 people, maybe more than that, come into my office and sit on my couch and tell me that they hate trans people.
sorry.
I've, I've
Yeah.
looked at them and said, you probably don't realize but I will say that I've had every one of them come back except for one.
Yeah.
Most people just don't realize.
No, they don't. They don't. And when I met you a couple of weeks ago, you're talking to me and you said, I'm a trans male. And I was like, "Oh, okay. No clue." And really, I mean, I identify you as a male and my trans females, I don't even use trans female. They're just my female friends because that's who they are.
You know, I think one of the things that I struggled to get my head around is like myself, I medically transitioned at 19. I'll be 50 years old in August. I have been a man longer than I was ever a woman. I know very honestly, I don't know anything about being a woman other than what I picked up living with women that I've been married to. And it it's very difficult for me to understand the importance that's placed on a physical structure on someone's body and how that is what our society is so torn up about right now,
Mhm.
especially when it comes to children. Because unfortunately, if you are trans and you understand this at a very young age, the way I did, the way I see some kids, you know, at that age. It's very difficult because when you're trans and you understand this, you have to think about things that other kids don't have to think about for years and years to come. And that causes so many difficulties for you. It's not something that you learn about. When I was 4 years old and sitting in that bathtub, nobody's ever talked to me about gender ideology. There was no such thing as gender ideology. I'd never heard the word transgender. In fact, I never heard the word transgender or saw a transgender person until I was 17 years old. And I saw one on a talk show that I knew exactly what I was from the time I was sitting in that bathtub, 4 years old. I did not meet another trans man until I was in my 30s. This is not something that's taught. Gender, gender identity is taught. Hate is taught.
Mhm.
Transphobia, that's taught. Homophobia, that's taught. That's very specifically, those are things that are very specifically taught to children because no one's born to hate. But gender identity is not taught. We're born with that.
Yeah. Yeah. And,
And
you're saying, this is hate and there it's not taught. The amount of misinformation that is intentionally set out there and then just regurgitated over and over again. It blows my mind. and the willingness of people to believe it.
I think that's one of the hardest parts. I so many times whenever I have told people that I'm trans, and I mean, here's the thing. I don't it's not a big deal to me. Like I said, I have been a man longer than I was ever one. So sometimes it comes up and it's pertinent. I don't wear a t-shirt or a sticker that says I'm trans. If it's pertinent, I tell people. If somebody becomes a close friend of mine, I tell them that if I see somebody in the grocery store and I bump into them, I don't inform them. It's not their business. I did not tell my children until they were old enough to understand the concept because I don't believe any should describe their genitals to their child. I just don't think it's important. But I feel like when people find out or when I tell people, they're very shocked of how quote unquote normal my life is. And my life is so normal, it's boring. And it always amazes me because I asked, what do you think we do? Do you think we all go home and put on silver G work on the pride float? That I do the exact same things that anybody else does every single day. We're no different. No different. We don't sit around and think about our genitals all the time. In fact, we don't think about them at all. In fact, the conservatives think about them enough for all of us. We don't have to think about them at all. But that's a frequent response that I find is that well, you're so normal. Well, yeah. What do you think I do?
Yeah. But that's also showing the level of ignorance we have in this society over the LGBTQ plus community overall. I know my daughter gets she and her wife, for some reason they seem to think that they're open to threesomes. They've been propositioned so many times, and Rachel's like, "I'm married," and she was telling me that, and I was like, "You are kidding me." She's like, "No, I get that all the time." And I'm just like, that to me is just crazy, you know? And if and it's usually the conservatives that are propositioning them, and I'm like, "You gotta be kidding me." It doesn't what's being said and then what's matching up doesn't correlate, if you know what I mean. Yeah. So I can only imagine you're 4 years old or 5 years old, and your body's not matching what your brain is telling it. The level of anxiety that you would experience as a human being trying to perform the way society expects you to has gotta be off the charts.
I had an ulcer, bleeding ulcer. I had attempted suicide multiple times by the time I was 14. I was hospitalized in a psychiatric unit. The first time I attempted suicide was because I had a teacher at my school stand up in front of her class and tell her class not to have anything to do with me because I was such a horrible person. And when I went to the principal to report this, he denied that she would do that. And so my mother and I asked him if we could go and talk to her with him. And she admitted it to him that she had said that. And he did nothing about it. Tried to kill myself that night.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I mean, life is pretty hard. I
Yeah.
don't know why, but you don't have the coping skills that you do when you're at 30. And so, yeah, and that documentation or that statistic, people will grab a hold of it. They see see they're mentally ill when they don't see the overall statistic of, "No, it's not bad." They're not being accepted because once they're accepted, those numbers go down to, as I say, normal levels. They drop like 6%, which as a society is what we experience.
At
So
that time, I had not come out to anybody, so I was dealing with all of this internally. And so when that happened, in addition to me understanding that I was going to burn in hell for eternity, which is what my church had told me, my thoughts that I was the only person like this, that I would never find anyone who would accept me, that there's nobody else on earth like me that's dealing with what I'm dealing with. And then a person who's a teacher who are supposed to protect children and help children to stand up and tell her entire class. One of the people in there was my best friend, who was the one who told me, just confirmed that she was also a member of my church, just confirmed everything that had been going in my head for the last couple of years. That was what pushed me over the edge. And
and
then I was
understandably
hospitalized.
so. Yeah, yeah, understandably so. So I'm glad you're still here, and I'm glad you've
Thank
had
you.
this sorry for everything you've gone through, but I am glad you've gotten the support and the love that you deserve. If somebody what would you tell a parent if their kid came out and said, "I think I'm trans?" What would you tell the parent that they should be looking at and guiding or how are they gonna go into this unknown territory now?
I think the first thing that you need to do, regardless of how you feel about it, is love your child. Tell that child that you love them and that they're perfect no matter how they are, because they are. And get some education and some support for yourself because you're going to fight this battle for them until they're able to. I would not have survived if my mother had not fought for me. She championed me. She held me up when I could not stand. She walked when I could not walk. She's the reason that I'm here. She is the reason I survived. She is the reason that I have helped thousands of people, whether it's through directly counselors that have now gone to work with people like me. You, as a parent, will either be the reason your child survives or the reason that they struggle and face every obstacle and challenge. Even
And
if you believe
yeah.
you can support them and love them.
Mhm. Well, and it's like you said, education's the key factor.
Yes.
And, I asked the question the other day, if you as a parent can't accept and love your child, how do you expect the world to?
How do you expect your child to?
Yeah, yeah.
The hardest thing about being trans is learning to love ourselves. If we can't learn to love and accept ourselves, we will never accept it from another person. Not that another person can't love us, so we won't let them love us. We'll never believe it. We have to learn to do that so that we can form healthy attachments with other people. We're not meant to be by ourselves. No human being is meant to be. But we have to be able to form a bond and a healthy bond and attachment with another person. And if our primary caregivers are unable to love us and accept us, we're not able to recreate that bond with other people. And that sets us up for the rest of our lives. And it's a lot of work to be able to correct that if that's not something we're able to do as children.
That's great. And then somebody as a friend, maybe parent, but a friend, what would you tell them about somebody that's come out to them? Somebody that is a friend, that and their friend has come out saying, "Hey, I'm trans." How would they and they don't know anything, and it's like you said, it wasn't a big surprise, but none of your friends shifted away from you, so to speak, but do people do lose their friends when they come out. What would you tell that friend?
I try very hard to try to help both sides. So when I talk to people who are trying to accept trans people, one of the things that I try to really stress is it's not always the easiest thing to accept right off, and that's okay. There's a lot of things that we don't accept. All people have trouble accepting things. That doesn't mean that we can't respect. That doesn't mean that we can't love somebody. You don't have to accept every part of somebody to still love them. If you loved them before this, if you liked everything about them before this is one part. But what we can do is we can respect them and we can try to understand. And that can often bring, except that on the other side of that coin, I also see a lot of trans people who, when they come out, they have this expectation of immediate acceptance and immediate embrace. And so I also talk to them and I say, how long did you know that you were trans before you were able to come out and tell people and you were able to be okay? It took me about 10 or 11 years from the time I knew I was 4 years old until I was almost 15 before I finally was able to tell my mother and my friends. It took me almost 11 years to accept myself being trans. And so we also need to remember that and give people a little bit of grace. And I don't mean being accepting ill treatment or accepting abuse. But if they can still be respectful and show kindness, just because they may not be able to fully accept, I don't believe that we should just cut somebody off because I do believe people grow. A lot of times we do have to reach across the aisle to them because people don't, unfortunately, sometimes know how to learn about us or they're afraid to ask questions. So we sometimes have to give that to them. But I have worked the last 30 years educating people and advocating for this community. And like I said, I can count on one hand how many people I've lost, but it's because I was willing to answer questions. I was willing to provide the questions and the answers whenever people were too shy to ask. And that has brought understanding. They now do drag shows at the VFW in my hometown.
Yeah.
Bro, people change. It does happen. And that's a town of 5,000 people. This is not a bustling metropolis.
Well, and I usually don't like to get political, but unfortunately the trans community is really under siege on state legislation, federal legislation, and that, they're saying, "We're gonna protect the women." I've been around trans women all my life, like I said before, I had no clue, and I've never been threatened by one. They may have helped me with the shade of lipstick or something. I've never been threatened by a trans male, and so what can somebody do on a state or federal level, I mean, to get this stopped? Because to me, it's legislation that doesn't benefit the majority in any way. It doesn't benefit society in any way other than perpetuate misinformation, and to me, it's a modern day witch hunt.
I think just like any other witch hunt, any other population that's targeted with lies, it's the truth. We talk about these sports fans. People need to know that the state of Kentucky getting all up in arms about this sports ban was over one little girl. All that debate, all that money spent talking about all this sports ban, that was over one elementary school child. There are less than 20 trans athletes in the country. There is no females in danger from trans women. People are not afraid of trans women hurting women. People are afraid of gendered men hurting women, and there's a difference.
Yeah. Well, and
People do
statistics
not.
back up cisgender men attack.
Yes. No one goes to a medical transition and has surgery so they can go into a woman's bathroom and assault them. No cis man is going to do that. It doesn't occur. The process of which you have to go through to transition, it would not happen. And I'll tell you why. Because the therapist who's going to write the letter will know that you are not trans, and they will never recommend you for hormones. They will never recommend you for surgery because there is a scrutiny that occurs during that process. We do not write these letters just for anybody. It's not something you just come out and say, "Hey, I'd like to go take hormones and get surgery." And I say, "Oh, okay, well, you must be trans." We've been trained and educated and certified and licensed. It's a long process. It's not something that we just do for anybody. There's times that we deny people, even deny people who are trans because they're not fit for surgery. They may become that at some point, but if you're not mentally stable, we cannot provide that letter. We're certainly not going to provide it to someone who is not trans.
Absolutely. Well, it's like, about 2 years ago, this guy was in a woman's bathroom in a woman's dress, and he was not trans, but the newspaper portrayed him being trans, and a friend of mine said, "Here he is." And I said, "No, he's pretending. He's not a trans male or female." And she goes, "But he's in a dress." And I go, "If he was in a bush, you wouldn't call him a bush. If he
Right.
jumped out at that person out of a bush, you wouldn't have said, 'Well, this guy was pretending to be a bush.' This is the way he hid because he's a predator." And there's a big difference, and that's what needs to be understood.
I think that's one of the most comical things about this bathroom bans are you're not going to catch trans women in the bathroom. If nothing else, the way they're evaluating, they will probably get core cisgendered women who are masculine or who have COS so that they in some way look masculine in ways that they're not able to control. Trans women study gender. Trans people study gender because we are not taught that, especially trans women. This is what I do for a living. Trans women transition as adults. When you are brought up as a female, you are taught. Females are taught. They're taught to do hair. They're taught to do makeup. They're taught how to sit. They're taught that this is acceptable and this is not. And this is how you do it and this is how you don't do it. When little boys are brought up, they're also instructed not the same. We learn more by watching. Hell, I know 50-year-olds who still don't comb their own hair. But you're not going to trans women because trans women do gender. That's not who they're catching. It's just not. And you'll not catch trans men because we pass. I have never, ever, ever, ever been looked at twice going into a bathroom. Even before I started hormones, I was never looked at twice. In fact, when I visited my endocrinologist the first time to be prescribed hormones, he thought I was there for urology. He did not even think I was trans. And which also brings up an interesting point is that it's always targeted toward trans women. Would you want to see this person going in behind your daughter in the bathroom? Well, how would you like to see me going in behind your daughter?
Mhm.
I wouldn't like to see somebody looking like me going behind my daughter in the bathroom. But here's the thing. If you go into the stall and you use the bathroom and you leave like you're supposed to, no one knows and no one cares. You're going to the bathroom to go to the bathroom. I don't know what cisgender people do in the bathrooms that's so different, but trans people, they're trying to go to the bathroom. We don't go to spaces to harass people. Most trans people that I have known, and I have known thousands, have had so much anxiety, so much fear from the straight cis community. They do not go into those types of spaces and hang out. They go in there because they are forced to because they have to use a bath. It's not a place they're wanting to hang out and make friends. I don't know what they're not in there for any purpose other than to use the toilets and leave. So these bathroom bans are comical because they're not going to do anything to trans people. And my feeling on it is that they know that. And what they're doing is they're not trying to catch trans people. What they're doing is they're trying to eliminate trans people from using a bathroom. They're trying to force them anxiety and their fear up high enough that they will not be using a bathroom at all. That's my suspicion.
Yeah. Modern day segregation. So what are you currently working on?
Well, currently, I am the president of the LGBTQ organization here in Owensboro, and we are determined to build and keep our community thriving and alive, and hopefully getting more opportunities to gather and celebrate and to support candidates politically that will fight for rights and just trying to survive and maintain a sense of pride because we are proud to be who we are. We are proud that we have come as far as we have, even though this recent administration has done its best to tear every. There have been some great people that have come out of the LGBT community, and we have been here since the beginning of time, just like everyone else. They've done a lot of really good work erasing us, but there have been some really great contributions made to mankind from people from the LGBT community. I think really one of the things is just that I really hope that, other people, whether you're LGBT or you are supportive of you're an ally, to realize that you do matter. Your voice matters, your vote matters. It's easy to believe some of the things that people say. It's easy to feel like what you're doing doesn't, but it does. And we have to get out and support each other. We have to get out and support the people who are supporting us, whether that is businesses or politicians. It's going to take everybody to rebuild. And I think that especially right now, it's important that we would look out for each other, that we check on each other, that we try to be as cohesive in our communities. There's been a lot of talk about separating the LGB from the T. I think that is a crazy idea because so many of the T's are also part of the LGBs, and people don't think about that. Trans is a gender identity, yes, but every gender identity has a sexuality as well.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. So let me ask you this before we kind of wrap things up. If someone hasn't come out yet and they're scared, they're that 14-year-old, what would you say to them?
I would say first and foremost, they have to. If coming out is going to put them in danger, then the best thing to do is to stay safe. But that once who is safe, whether that is a person at their church, whether that is a teacher, which is kind of iffy right now, or a friend or a neighbor, somebody that they can share something with who's going to be safe and support them. I think that they should try to come out because it's very hard to hold all these things inside. And even just having one trusted person can really make a difference in your life. But if there's not, seek an online resource. There's a lot of support. There's a lot of support out there. And just to know it gets better as hard as things are and as far away as it may seem. Hang on. It gets better. There are people out there who will love you, who will accept you, who will support you. Our community will lift you up. Your community will lift you up. It may be a little while before you can get anybody, but please hold on. Do not give up because we will be here when you can get to us and we will support you. We will hold you up. You are precious. You are loved and you are perfect the way you
Thank you. That is so beautiful. I'm tearing up again. I teared up when you were talking about your mom. I had to grab a tissue. It's yeah, because you know the statistics, you already know the struggle, I do too, and I want people to really focus on that, to support and love unconditionally. It is the greatest gift we can give each other. So, thank you so much. I greatly appreciate you. I hope I can get this sound correct because 'cause I'm getting a lot of echo. I don't know what's going on there, but we can do another episode in the near future as well.
I think
So,
that would be wonderful.
that would be great because we need to until we just need to have these talks so that we get information out there and that it is correct and that we are heard. So thank you so much for joining me today. I greatly appreciate it. And that will be it for this week's episode.
My kid's gay and I'm okay. I love